Hello and welcome. We will split this final part of the Forgot My Password journey in two lectures. In this first lecture, we will add a Forgot My Password link to the login page, create a Forgot My Password controller that will handle the GET request when users click on the Forgot My Password link, handle the POST request when users enter their email address, send a password reset token email to the user's inbox. We will create the Bootstrap form where users can enter their email address, and finally, we will test the whole Forgot My Password journey up to the point where we receive the email. We will again reuse the Forgot Password branch. We can do this by executing the git command git checkout forgot password. Now, let's step back at the beginning of our journey. The action that triggers the Forgot My Password journey is that users click on the Forgot Your Password link. This action sends a GET request to the controller, and the application displays to the users the form where they can enter their email address. First, we want to create a Forgot My Password controller to handle the necessary requests. We can right-click on the controller's package, select New Class, and name it Forgot My Password Controller. As usual, we will annotate it with the @controller annotation, and we will declare an SLF4J to log messages later on. We can now create a constant called email address view name and assign it the value Forgot My Password /email form. We can also create another constant called Forgot Password URL mapping and set its value to /forgot my password. Then we can create a new method named Forgot Password Get, which returns the view name identified by the constant that we have just created. We will annotate this method with the @requestMapping annotation, where we will set the value attribute to Forgot Password URL mapping and the method attribute to requestMethod.get. Finally, we want to add the same constant to the list of publicly accessible paths in the security config class, as everyone should be able to access this functionality. Now we will add the Forgot My Password link to the login page. After the form element, we will add a simple anchor element with a th-href attribute pointing to /forgot my password, and a th text attribute that we will set to the i18n property login forgot password text. Then we will set this property to the value Forgot Your Password. Now, we will create a new folder named Forgot My Password under the Source Main Resources Templates folder, and here we will place all pages related to the Forgot My Password journey. We can right-click on this folder and create a new HTML file and name it emailform.html. I'm going to copy the code that I've prepared for this lecture, and then I'll talk you through it. Feel free to pause the video and implement what you see on the screen. The page defines a Bootstrap container with two rows. The first row contains a div for the messages that we will display to users once we have sent them the password reset email. It uses a thif attribute to check if the controller set a model map attribute named mailSent. If it has, it will show an acknowledgement message to the user. The second row contains a Bootstrap grid which displays an h1 heading with a form title, a br element to add a blank row, a Bootstrap well div to give the form a bit of breathing space, and inside it a Bootstrap form. The form contains the ID attribute with value Forgot Password form, a th action element with the value Forgot My Password, the method attribute set to post, and the role attribute set to form. When the submit button is pressed, the browser sends a POST request to the path /forgot my password. Therefore, in the Forgot My Password controller, we need to add a method that handles this request. The form then defines a Bootstrap form group div which contains a label and the input type for the email address. Notice how the input type defines the Bootstrap class form control. Finally, the form has another div for the submit button. As part of this page, we have defined the following i18n properties. Forgot My Password message sent success, to which we have assigned the value if there is a user for the email that you have entered we have sent them a password reset email. The property forgot my password fill in form below, to which we have assigned the value please fill in the form below. And finally, the property forgot my password submit text, to which we have assigned the value send password reset email. I will now show the email form HTML code again, so that you can pause the video and implement your form as it appears on my screen. As usual, if you run into problems, you can always clone my repository and compare your code with mine. Now, I will do the same with the messages.properties file. Please pause the video and make sure that your properties look like mine. I'm also going to separate the forgot my password properties in their own section and add a little comment. Before writing the method that handles the post request, let's try and see if the page displays correctly. We can start the DevOps Buddy application, click on the login link in the top right of the navbar, then on the forgot my password link and see if the form displays nicely. Great! Now we will head back to the forgot my password controller and implement the method that handles the post request. We will call it forgot password post. This method returns the same view name as its sibling, although the implementation will differ. The method will accept an HTTP servlet request, an email address, and the model map argument. Spring will initialize for us the HTTP server request and the model map. The email argument comes from the form. In order to capture it, we need to prefix it with the @requestParam annotation, to which we assign the same value as the name attribute for the email input type in the email form page. If you remember, we have assigned the value email to this attribute. Therefore, this is the value that we will set in the @requestParam annotation. We will also annotate the method with the @requestMapping annotation, for which we will set the value attribute to /forgotmypassword. Only this time we will set the method attribute to the value requestMethod.post. We have seen in the previous lecture that when users submit their email, we need to send them a password reset token email. First of all, we need to auto-wire a password reset token service in the controller. If you recall from the previous lecture, this service provides a create password reset token for email method that accepts an email as argument. Therefore, we can invoke this method assigning the return value to a password reset token local variable that we can name password reset token. We will use the email parameter as argument to the create password reset token for email method. If there isn't a user registered with that email, we simply log a warning message to the console and don't do anything else. This is because we don't want to give away to hackers information as to whether a certain email address exists. If the application found the user, we will log the token value from the password reset token object just to make sure that everything works as expected. We also want to set the email sent attribute to true into the model map before returning from that method. We will declare a constant named mail sent key with the value mail sent. To test our work so far, we need an email address of a user that has been created in the database. Since we create one as startup, we can use the value of the webmaster.email property that we have defined in the application-common.properties file under the user home /.devopsbuddy folder. Each one of us will have a different one. I will use marco@devopsfolks.com. We will then add a log debug statement in the else clause, which prints out the token value and the username. If we restart the application now and go through the forgot my password journey, entering the email address and clicking the submit button, we should see the log message in the console and an acknowledgement message on the page. To find the log message, look in the logs for the latest select statement. Our log message should come soon after that. You can also test with a non-existing email address. You should still see the green box at the top. From a user point of view, they don't know whether their email address was found, which is what we want to achieve. Great, our method handling works fine. Now we need to send the email to the user. In order to do so, we need to construct a URL that points to a path managed by our controller. In summary, assuming that the application is reachable at localhost 8080, we should construct a URL similarly to HTTP localhost 8080 change user password $ID equal user ID $token equal token. How can we do that? This is when the HTTP server request argument comes handy. We could create a utility method in the userUtils class which, given an HTTP server request object, the token and the user ID, builds the URL for us. We can also write a unit test to test it. In fact, why don't we start from the test? We will create a new package under source test java com devops buddy test and we will call it unit to differentiate it from the integration tests. We will then create a userUtils unit test class under this package. I'm going to copy this class implementation and then I'll talk you through it. When setting up Spring Boot, the Spring Initializer declared the Spring Test dependencies for us. This dependency makes available for us various test objects. One of them is the mock HTTP servlet request. As the name implies, this object mocks a real HTTP servlet request, so we don't have to physically access the web application to execute our test. By simply creating an instance of this object, we have an HTTP server request object to play with. We can add parameters to it and everything else that normally a servlet container does when creating an HTTP servlet request object. In our case, we create a new instance before each method runs. Then, in the test method, we set the server port to be 8080 as the default value is 80. Then, we create fictitious token and user IDs and we set the expected URL that the userUtils method should return. We then invoke the userUtils method and we assert that the expected and actual URLs are the same. Hang on a sec, we don't have a createPasswordResetURL method in the userUtil class. That's correct. And that's called test-driven development or TDD. In TDD, we write the test before writing the implementation. You will see why now TDD is an API design tool more than a testing automation tool. The IDE makes it easy to create the methods for us. All we need to do is ask. So we will ask IntelliJ to create this method in the userUtils class. For this method to work in a real scenario, we will need to declare the first method argument as HTTP servlet request. This is possible without breaking the test because mock HTTP servlet request is a subtype of HTTP servlet request. I'm going to copy this method's implementation from the code I prepared for this lecture and then I'll talk you through it. The method builds the URL by using the scheme, that is HTTP or HTTPS, the server name, in our case localhost, the server port 8080 and the context path, in our case just a / as we are running the application at the root context, to build the string HTTP localhost 8080. It then uses a constant that we need to create from the forgotMyPassword controller. This constant is really important as it defines the path that will handle the GET request when the user clicks on the link. Finally, it adds two request parameters. Since this will be a GET request, the parameters can be added following the URL. The first parameter is added after a question mark. It's named ID and contains the user ID. Every parameter after that will need to be defined following an ampersand. In our case, we have defined a parameter named token and assigned to it the value received as argument. The method then returns the URL. We now need to declare the change password path constant in the forgotMyPassword controller. We will declare it public so that we can reuse it and we set its value to / change user password. If we run the test now, it should go green. Now, we can head back to the forgotMyPassword controller and, in the else condition, invoke this method and assign its return value to the local variable resetPassword URL. To do so, we will declare a user variable and assign to it the value contained in the password reset token object. Similarly, we will declare a token local variable and assign to it the value from the password reset token object. Next, we can remove the log statements as we won't need them. Finally, we can pass these two arguments to the createPasswordResetURL method. To check how the URL looks like, we can restart the application and go through the Forgot My Password journey, and then inspect the logs. Great! Our URL looks fine. Now, we need to create an email message that contains a bit of text to explain the user what to do, and the reset password URL value so that they can click on it. Before doing so, we will add a new property to the messages.properties file, this time manually. We will call it forgotmypassword.email.text and assign to it the value. Please click on the link below to reset your password. Now, we can head back to the Forgot My Password controller and auto-wire an I18N service. If you recall, this is the service that handles internationalization. We also want to move this service under the service package for consistency. We will now auto-wire an email service and the webmaster email string using the @value annotation, for which we will set the value webmaster.email. As a reminder, this property value comes from the application common.properties file. Next, we will define a constant for the message property name that we have just added to the messages.properties file. We will call it email message text property name and will set it to forgotmypassword.email.text. We can now declare a local variable email text and set it to the value returned by I18N service.getMessage, to which we will pass as arguments the constants that we have just declared and request.getLocale. We will then create a simple mail message object and set the following attributes. 2 as the value for user.getEmail. Subject as DevOps buddy between brackets, how to reset your password. Text as the email text variable value, a new line and the URL. Finally, we will set the attribute from to the value of the webmaster email variable. The last thing we need to do is to invoke the email service sendGenericMessage method, passing as argument the email message object. To test the Forgot My Password journey with a real email, we need to make a temporary change to the application prod.properties file by adding to this file the properties within the application dev properties file. This is to allow the application to use the H2 in-memory database while sending real emails. We will also need to change the running profile to be prod. If we now go through the Forgot My Password journey, we will receive an email with a link to click. We can now close the Git flow workflow by running the following Git commands. Git add star, git commit -m implemented the first part of the Forgot My Password journey up to the point when we send an email, and git push. Then we will merge the develop with the git commands git checkout develop, git merge forgot password, and finally git push. In the next lecture, we will complete the Forgot My Password journey by handling the request when users click on the email link. Thank you for your time, and I see you in the next lecture.